Hey guys, the Superhero Bibliophiles episode you're about to listen to was originally part of the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club, an exclusive Patreon subscriber show I used to run a few years back. So if you're confused by out-of-date references or comments about the Patreon show, that's why. Now, enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club. This is the companion podcast exclusive only to Patreon subscribers, and I'm your host, Perry Constantine. And for today's book club episode, we've got a new guest who actually hasn't appeared on the main show yet, but he will be appearing later on. I record the main episode. The main show has these episodes recorded way far in advance, so you guys won't be able to listen to him for a few months yet, but he's here today, and that is Kay Wilson. Kay, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So before we get started, why don't you go ahead and tell my listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am the host and DM of Call Us Casters. It's an actual play D&D podcast about superheroes. So it's fitting that I'm on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it premieres July 26th. By this time, it might already be out. It is following three superheroes who are new to the game and are living in a superhero-filled world.
Awesome, cool. Sorry, I missed that. What game is that for?
Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay. Oh, so it's superhero themed, but you're using Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
Yep. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I've never heard of that before. So when you said superhero and RPG, I got those. Thought maybe you were talking about like the Champions game or something along those lines.
Right. Yeah, I've played those a little bit, but I'm most familiar with D&D.
So how does that work? How were you able to use I've never played D&D myself, so I'm not sure exactly, but how was it, what made you guys decide to take that system and to use it for superheroes instead of using one of the superhero games?
I think because it's the most accessible. A lot of people know Dungeons and Dragons compared to a lot of other RPG systems.
Mm-hmm.
And so one, it was easier to find a cast, but also two, with people listening to it, it's more accessible and it's more understandable for them to know what's going on in the D&D part of it.
Okay, cool. That sounds pretty interesting. And have you guys started, I know you said it hasn't come out yet, but have you started recording episodes already?
Oh, yeah. We've recorded 6 or 7 episodes by now. We're releasing the first episode or the first 3 episodes on July 26th. So
okay, cool. So how's it been so far as the recording sessions? You guys have been having a good time doing it?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, there are some challenges with not doing a traditional RPG setting that I've been running into, but nothing I can't handle. It's still been a lot of fun. And I have been working on, reflavoring a lot of abilities and things that come with D&D into a more superhero setting.
Okay, cool. And have you guys been have you been doing it all in person recording, or are you all remote like we are right now?
All remote. There's 4 of us and we're all across the United States.
Okay, cool. And so before we start talking about the book, what is your introduction to comics, superheroes, nerd shit in general?
So I did not get into comics until I was maybe 20.
Mm-hmm.
But before then, I was a WB kid. So all of the DC cartoons, Justice League Unlimited, Batman Beyond, Static Shock, those were my introduction to superheroes. And since then, I've always been really interested.
Mm-hmm.
When I started getting into comics, it was more because back, 8-9 years ago, there wasn't a ton of superhero media out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted more superhero media. So the best way to get that is comic books, really. And
yeah, there was this little bit of a desert time after after that big boom in the 90s animation, and then before like the MCU and all that, we had kind of like this long stretch where there were like a few movies, a few TV shows, but nothing that was really setting the world on fire in the same way that like the DCAU did or the X-Men animated series did.
For sure. Yeah. And the movies that we were getting weren't always the greatest. So
exactly. Yeah. Okay. Now I was really excited when you picked this book because today we're talking about The Bounce by Joe Casey. And bring up the credits here. So yeah, written by Joe Casey, art by David Messina. Sonia Harris is graphic designer, a story consultant, and she did the art for a few pages. Gaetano Carlucci did the inker for some of it. Giovanna Nito did the coloring. Fabiola, I'm probably going to mispronounce this name, Iene, color assistant and colorist on some of the later books. Claudia Scarlett Gothica, also colorist on some of the later books. Valentina Cuomo, color assistant on at least one of the issues. Russ Wooten is the letterer, and it was conceived by Joe Casey and Sonia Harris. And this was an Image book. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Joe Casey, but you got to let me go on a little bit of a a gushing spree here, because for my money, Joe Casey is like one of the most underrated comic book writers of all time. Like I first got interested in his stuff way back when he was doing Deathlock for Marvel back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was amazing. I had no familiarity with the character of Deathlock, but he had springboarded into it from this really kind of bad X-Men crossover event that launched Deathlock. It also relaunched a Machine Man series, and also a Warlock series, the New Mutants Warlock, not Adam Warlock. And I picked up all of them, but Deathlock was the one that really kind of spoke to me, and the one that really kind of set things apart. And it was just such a unique book at the time. It was so different from anything I had read. And then he went on to do stuff like Scott Lobdell had tried to relaunch Wildcats in the early 2000s, and it was kind of a really messy book when he was on it. But then Joe Casey came in later in the run, and he really kind of like streamlined it and made it really accessible and really interesting. And then he went on from that to do Wildcats version 3.0, which was this incredible, unique blend of superheroes and corporations. And then he also did a brief run on Uncanny X-Men during the Morrison era, which a lot of people I think unfairly maligned, but I really enjoyed. But then he also did a great run on Adventures of Superman. He did Mr. Majestic, and he also did this other Wildstorm book, which is like so surreal and meta. It was called Automatic Kafka, which unfortunately those Wildstorm books he did, like his Wildcats, his Automatic Kafka, it's not in print anywhere. So if you can find those books anywhere, please buy them, like on eBay or whatever you can. But he's just such a unique voice and such a unique talent, and it really kind of upsets me in hindsight that he doesn't get the kind of credit that I think he deserves. And I had heard about The Bounce, but this originally came out during a time when I wasn't really reading comics, so I didn't pick it up. And only fairly recently I saw that it was on Comixology in this complete edition. And I've been meaning to pick it up. So when you suggested we talk about this, I was so excited. So that's kind of my little Joe Casey gushing. And now I believe he's not really doing comics anymore. He's mostly doing like TV and stuff. He's part of the Man of Action Studios with Joe Kelly, Stephen T. Siegel, and Duncan Rolu, and they've done things like Ben 10 and Avengers Assemble and some other animated series and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like my little preamble on Joe Casey. But what about you? Did you have any familiarity with Casey, or did you just kind of come into this completely cold?
Yeah, when I first read this, I came into it completely cold. And I picked it up because I like the art style, and, the story grabbed me pretty well. I like the story a lot. Of course, it has its issues, but, it's still a good comic. And really what drew me to it was the art style.
So did you pick this up as after it came out in the full collection, or did you pick it up when it was in being published in single issues?
Full collection.
Okay. So what were kind of some of your opinions going back and rereading this book?
So I hadn't read this book in 5 years, maybe. So it's something that I really love, but reading this book now and having read a lot of other comic books before, it's still a good story, but there are definitely some things that could have changed. Like, I feel like the ending kind of falls flat. And, I really like the premise of the character being a, pothead superhero, someone who doesn't really care, but still does the job. I like the story and where it goes for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought this is my first experience, so I'm still kind of gushing over it, just because I wasn't, it was a little bit different from what I expected, because I had remembered the premise of, this kind of like burnout superhero idea, basically like what if Peter Parker was a pothead type of idea, was
Right.
kind of like the basic thrust behind it. And I do like where the book ended up going and being this kind of like larger meta commentary on superheroes and this idea of these different universes kind of colliding. I thought that was really interesting, and it got really really trippy at times, but I did think that felt like a story that you do around issue 50 instead of issue 12, is kind of like the thing I was thinking about it as I was reading. I really found myself, as we got deeper and deeper into the lore between these two universes, I found myself wishing that we had actually focused more on Jasper and his life, actually.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like it should have focused on a lot of the characters more than it did. Like with the Vamp. I thought the Vamp was a very interesting character, but she was used for an issue and a half and then at the end. And I feel like with a lot of that, focusing on Jasper and Tare, his roommate, like their kind of relationship and all of that, it definitely could have been fleshed out more. And I understand that it was a limited run comic, right? It was only 12 issues, but I also agree that type of storyline, they could have pushed it out to issue 25, 30, 35 and made it a much better story.
Yeah. Another example of a character that I feel was kind of underutilized in that was, and I'm not sure if this character was ever named, but the guy in the hospital, he seemed like he was, I don't know, I don't know Spanish, so I couldn't understand what he was saying, but I kind of got the sense that he was trying to like explain his situation, that he wasn't really there to cause trouble, but he was just kind of in a bad situation. And I felt like that was kind of a story subplot or something that never got picked up again at all.
Yeah, and it was a real shame because I speak a little bit of Spanish, and basically what he was saying was, I need to get out of here. I want to go home. Like, I don't want to hurt anybody. Like, just a really confused guy who just wants to get home. And that is definitely a story that could have been fleshed out and made to be, even if it was a tragic story where he doesn't end up getting home, it could have been something that could have been really impactful. And it was so quick and so rushed that, it affected the main character, but it didn't, I feel like it doesn't really affect the reader.
Right. Yeah. I feel like that it's one of those things that it feels like it was in there. And if you're not going to pick up on that later, I did kind of find myself wondering, which makes me wonder, what was the publication history behind this book? Like, was it a truncated run or something? Because that feels like something that's supposed to be picked up on. It's weird to just introduce that and then just kind of drop it like that.
Right.
So I do wonder if maybe this, and I know one of the issues that Casey had was that, which is one of my beefs with comic book reading public, is that he didn't get the attention he deserved even when he was writing these books. So a lot of these really great titles, these really ambitious books he was doing, they ended up getting canceled before he really got to see them to their fruition. And I know that happened with Wildcats. That definitely happened with Uncanny X-Men, and I wonder if that also happened here with the Bounce.
Hearing that, it does kind of sound like it could have, because yeah, like I feel like the first 4 or 5 issues are much more, not slower, but builds up better. And then when you get to like especially the last like 3 or 4 issues, I feel like there's so much going on. It's just like snowballing so quickly.
Right. It starts, you're right. It's not, slower is not the right word. I think maybe like a moderate speed would probably be a good way of describing it. And then and then it's like when he gets to those last few issues, it's like he steps on the gas, and it's like we have to get all this done now. So that's really kind of a feeling I got as well reading it. And that's not to say I didn't enjoy what I was reading, but there did feel like there was a lot more room to explore, especially with also Jasper's relationship with his brother too, who's this assistant DA,
Right.
who's got his own issues with substance abuse, and that's another subplot that's really kind of just rushed through really quickly.
Yeah, and especially because like with both of them abusing substances, and there's a couple mentions of Jasper's parents dying, but we don't really get too much of an explanation about what happened or anything like that. I think that is definitely something that could have been explored more too, is their relationship, and that going back and forth of this person who's trying to get the metahumans or whatever they're called, compared to the person who is one.
Yeah, that you make a good point there about the comparison between the two, and I felt the same thing. I mean, there's a lot you can comment on that about how they're both abusing substances, but because Jasper's is pot, which is illegal at the time of publication, that's considered wrong and immoral, whereas it's okay for his brother who's abusing arguably a worse substance, but
Right.
it's legal, and so it's a more respectable type of substance abuse. So there's a definite contrast there that can be explored. And also when you look at their reasons for doing stuff, because Jasper's just trying to help people, and he's doing he's working, he's an outlaw, even though all he wants to do is help people, whereas his brother, I can't remember his brother's name off the top of my head. Do you recall?
No, I can't remember either.
Okay, I'll try to bring it up as we're reading through this, but his brother, he's this district attorney or assistant district attorney who is working within the law, and there's kind of this idea that he's Jeremiah, that's his brother's name.
Yep.
So he's working inside the law, but doesn't really seem to be pursuing any sort of sense of justice. It's just more it's more of personal enrichment type of thing, and again, there's that commentary on the legal system. Who does the legal system benefit? And I think all that stuff there's a lot you can do with that, and they just don't. And that was kind of disappointing.
Yeah, the personal enrichment, and there's this feeling of he's just doing his job. He's just doing what he's told to do, even though he kind of hates what he's doing. It's something that could have been expanded a lot.
Also, and going along that route, I felt like Jasper's motivation for being a superhero too wasn't really well explored, or him getting the suit and all that. I would have liked to see at least some mention of how this stuff comes about, which again, I think may be a victim of the truncated series, if assuming that's what happened.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed in one of the flashbacks of him getting his power is that it jumps from him going from the experimentation, and then he has a suit. There's nothing in between.
Right.
And it's like okay, so he just has a random super suit for no reason.
Also, the whole idea of Terry being a drag queen was another interesting angle. And when this was published, I think it was published in the probably early 2000s, I believe, early or mid-aughts, somewhere around there.
I think it was 2013.
Oh, really? Oh, so wow, it's a lot later than I thought. Okay, so yeah, that's surprising. That's a really interesting thing to toss in now, because usually when trans type stuff was addressed in comics in the past, it was treated more as a joke. And Casey doesn't really do, like, there's that initial shock moment, and when it's a cliffhanger at the end of the chapter, but after that, it's not treated as a joke, right? It's just, okay, this is just who he is. And like, there's that great scene where him and Jasper and Terry are sitting on the couch, and Jasper's wearing his wig, Terry's wearing his Jasper's mask, and they're just chatting like nothing has changed between them. And I did like that that kind of normalization of the identity issues.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of the times trans and LGBT issues, there are two uses for it, either trauma or comedy, like you said.
Right.
And this was really neither. It was just another part of an everyday life type of situation, which is nice to see, especially something that wasn't made in the last 5 years.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was really progressive for Casey to handle it that way. And but that's also more stuff you could explore, especially with, the whole idea of being a superhero could definitely tie into that too. There's, hiding who you really are, that whole kind of idea. So there's a lot of stuff like that that you could play off of in a comparison between Jasper and Terry, which again just doesn't really, there's a lot of character stuff, there's a lot of potential character stuff in this book, and Casey sets up a lot of really interesting dominoes that then just get never touched.
Yeah, you're right.
What did you, so even though we've talked about how it does kind of rush through things, what did you think of the overall meta story of these two universes colliding?
I thought it was really interesting. When you're looking at a world where it's very Marvel like, it's very DC like, where there are superheroes everywhere, everyone's a superhero, and then going to a world that's a lot like ours where there's nothing like that anywhere. It's a really interesting concept of that bleeding into our universe. It's fun, and that could lead to a lot of crazy situations, which it did. But it was definitely interesting. I enjoy that part a lot.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun, and I felt like there was some meta commentary Casey was making on superheroes as a whole. And this idea of like, kind of serving this higher power and all that. I felt like there was because Casey, I feel like he got kind of burned by working in superhero comics. And there's this quote I remember someone said on, some comic creator posted on Twitter. I can't remember who it was, but they said comics will break your heart. Working in comics will break your heart. And I think that definitely happened with Casey, with just like the way he got treated by the medium, by the industry. And I do feel like there's a lot of that kind of stuff that he's working through in some of these pages and some of those later issues when we find out like what Darling's up to and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
That actually makes me think, like with Xander, being stuck in the wrong universe and constantly trying to commit suicide, and he never can because somebody stops him and saves him. It kind of hearing that about Casey, it kind of feels like, Casey might have been feeling trapped while he was writing this. He might have been feeling like, well, I'm stuck in this superhero centric career, and this isn't necessarily something that I'm going to want to do because I feel burnt out and I'm feeling underappreciated. That's a really interesting thing to think about with Xander.
I'm not so sure if I'd go that far because Casey seems to have a genuine love of superheroes. You see that in a lot of his superhero books. He's not like, I could see that coming from someone like that kind of idea coming from like Warren Ellis or Garth Ennis or something like that. But Casey is more like Grant Morrison in that way, where he's got this definite love of superheroes. So I don't know if it was so much that he felt trapped by it, but here's this great thing where stuff like this really kind of grabbed me, where Darling's talking to Jasper at the end, and he says, one thing I've learned in this world, it takes the right kind of showmanship to make an impression. But then again, it goes way deeper than wrong place, wrong time, doesn't it? And I do feel like that kind of showmanship is kind of like, because he was kind of that showman type of thing. He tried to have that kind of like showmanship personality if you read some of his own interviews. And I wish I could dig up these interviews that I read, because there was one I had read a few years after where he kind of talked about how he had briefly had this brief moment of comic book superstardom when he was like on the cover of Wizard magazine and all this kind of stuff. And there's this other part he says when Darling says your problem is simply one of displacement. So I don't know. I wish I'd taken some notes about this to really kind of lay this out better. But I did feel like there was a lot of stuff that Casey was just kind of working through So not so much that he felt trapped by superhero comics, but I think more that the industry wasn't quite giving him the room he needed to kind of play with these ideas.
That makes sense.
What did you think of Darling? Because he was kind of an interesting character. I didn't quite, I'm not quite sure what to make of him.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the beginning of the volume, you are expecting him to be this super evil guy, and then towards the end, especially in the last fight, it's more like, no, he's just doing what he needs to do to protect their universe, and is actually, kind of saves the life of the Bounce. It was interesting. It was an interesting kind of change for the character that I wasn't really expecting.
Here's another line that I thought was really telling. This is what I was looking for. The cancer rotting our reality, our souls, the darkness we've lived with since the beginning of time. It's enough already. You're going to help me fix everything. So I did kind of feel like this was, because if you read a lot of Casey's superhero books, especially his Superman run, there is this kind of optimism and this kind of sense of wonder that he's trying to bring back into superhero comics. And when he was working in comics, like that was pushed aside in favor of the more nihilistic stuff that like Mark Miller was doing over in like the Ultimate books or in Civil War. And I do feel like that's kind of something that Morrison also struggled with as well. I think I see a lot of commonalities in Casey and Morrison's work. And I think there's a lot that's connected in there with those two ideas. So yeah, I think there's this kind of idea of like him trying to connect bring this superhero world and bring it into the regular world, the dark nihilistic world. And whereas most people, most modern creators, they tend to do the opposite. They try to bring like the darkness and the nihilism of the real world, and they try to infect it into like the superhero stuff. And you see that with like in comics with like Civil War. You see it in movies like the Snyder films, or even the Nolan films, right? Back when this came out. And my late co-host Derek Ferguson, he said that one of the problems he had with the Nolan Batman films is that by trying to ground Batman in the real world so much, it proved to him that Batman doesn't work in the real world. And I think there's kind of that idea of, instead of trying to ground superheroes and try to dirty them up, why don't we try to make the real world more like bring some of that wonder and that optimism from superheroes into the real world. I thought that was kind of an interesting flip on that usual dynamic.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, were there any other things that kind of jumped out at you as you were rereading this?
I can't remember her name right now.
You talking about Silver?
Yes, Silver. I liked her character, especially because it starts out with her being that stereotypical palm reading psychic, but really her power is super powerful in the two universes. I really liked her character because she kind of acted as a guide for Jasper, and I think there were a couple of issues with her character, with how she was kind of treated, but for the most part, I liked how she acted as that conduit, and she was frankly more useful than Jasper was anyways. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, I thought she was an interesting character as well. But yeah, I did feel like, and I think this might be down to like the truncated nature of the series, but it did feel like there was more that could have been done with her. And I was very curious about where they were going. One of the nice things about this is it sets up the kind of larger universe really well. Like early on, we have these, when it opens up, you think it's just going to be, okay, it's almost like a bait and switch in a way, because it starts off and you think it's going to be about, and I think this is kind of one of the issues that, you kind of touched on, where when you start reading the book, it seems like it's just going to be, Spider-Man, but if he was a pothead
Right.
type of thing.
Yeah.
and it seems like it's just going to be like a more mature take on superheroes. But then as we get going, they throw in these little kind of curveballs there. Like when he suddenly wakes up in this other reality and this dream, and you're not sure, like when he finds Xander, is this a dream world he's in? Is he dreaming? What's going on here? And then you eventually get to the point where he finds out that it was this other reality where superheroes are, commonplace.
Right. Yeah. I think another thing that could have been expanded a lot too, going back to his drug use, is when the fellow that was speaking Spanish, when he died, that affected him a lot, and he ran straight to pot for coping.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And that's something that could have been explored a lot, is his relationship with reality and his relationship with drugs to help him deal with the stresses that a superhero deals with.
Yeah, because when you think about that, and that's another thing that goes to, what's his motivation for putting on that costume in the first place? Because, if most people like you or I, if we develop superpowers in the real world, I don't think we'd necessarily go and put on a costume and start fighting crime right away. If anything, it might do more of like the Smallville thing, where maybe you help people in secret when you can, but it takes you, but you don't quite jump right into, I'm going to be a superhero now. Yeah. And it's kind of that idea. It's like, only someone who's high would think that was a good idea. So I think there's something you could have played with that.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely, I just wish we could explore more of his inner life, of more of his motivations and how he felt about everything. And it just moved too quickly to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I did feel that because of that, Jasper kind of gets lost when we get into he kind of gets overshadowed by the larger conflict that's happening. And even though he does kind of solve the problem, I feel like not enough work was done to really kind of show, like, to really kind of connect him to the climax.
I agree, especially because they're showing that there are a lot of these superpowered people that are around. I mean, obviously not as much as the other universe, but he was not necessarily needed in the finale. It could have been anybody. And with the fact that his main job in that was just to distract the Crusher, the demon version of the Crusher, it just kind of felt like I wish he had more faculty to do something in this finale, in this like major climax.
Right. And that, again, I keep going back to his motivation for this too. And I was thinking about, I'm gonna try kind of jumping around, but I'm jumping back to something you'd said earlier when you made the comparison with Jeremiah and his substance abuse. It also made me wonder about, why are each of them abusing substances? Like, is it because of their parents' death? Is there some other reason? Like for Jasper, because it does kind of feel, the way he's written, that Jasper is trying to escape reality in a way. And I feel like there's a lot of subtext that could have been played with there, that it's just kind of like left there on the floor, and we're just there to kind of pick up the pieces if we want to think about that more.
Yeah, exactly. Especially because like the first time that he went into the other universe was because he was trying to escape reality. He was trying to find another drug. And so that relationship is really interesting.
And I found myself wondering about, what's this, because he's got this ending. It ends in kind of a weird place. Because I'm not quite sure what to make of the ending. It feels like it's, and in fact, I noticed is that it seems like the two universes have almost merged in a sense, because you see that shot of New York, and you see most of familiar buildings, but then you also see what looks like the Twin Towers, but they're like a more high-tech version of the Twin Towers. And there's some other like futuristic buildings in the background. So I found myself wondering, what is this real world now? And he says at the end, I'm not in any hurry to suit up again. Maybe I won't need to. And I did find myself wondering, what is this new world like? What really kind of happened there at the end?
Yeah, and I almost feel like the panel that shows the city, it has an optimistic feel to it.
Mhm.
And while they're talking about the trauma that they experienced right before the scene, it still feels not happy, but like hopeful. It
Mhm.
feels hopeful. And it would have been really interesting to see, another run of this in a new and different world that we haven't really experienced, because we didn't experience a lot of the other universe with the superheroes. And are there going to be more people with superpowers? Are there going to be, different things that we're not used to in our reality?
Well, also on that note, Darling's time travel thing, right? That's something else that kind of, I wasn't sure what to make of it, and it feels like something that's tossed in there, but it's not really explained in a way that I was really kind of comfortable with. How about you? What did you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. They talked about it. We saw what was happening, but there was no, not that I need like a really crunchy explanation of what was going on.
Mhm.
But there was no depth to it. It just kind of felt like a plot hook, or and I agree.
Let's talk about the art for a little bit here. There's one panel in particular, like this is on page 237 in the Kindle version. It's in issue 11. It's this big double page spread of when Jasper comes into Darling's laboratory, and it's just this beautiful rendition of all this high tech stuff. You've got, you know, Jasper's like really small, and you've got Jasper at the top of it, and you've got Darling at the bottom, and they draw these little insert panels to kind of highlight them a little bit more. And I thought it was just, you know, I don't know, this panel, it just really kind of, this page just really kind of struck me. It's just like how well designed everything is, and I think that's a good way to kind of describe the art as a whole. Like this book is absolutely beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree. This panel, and then there's a panel that is in one of the action scenes. I wish I had written down what page it was on, but it was the one where people were firing at him, and it was just a large panel with him in the center and the bullets all around him.
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of the action scenes are very dynamic, and you can tell that there's a lot of inspiration from Spider-Man, especially with the bounce.
Oh yeah.
But I really love the dynamic part of all of the art, because I just feel like there's always motion. Even with the talking heads, which there are quite a few talking heads, there's still emotion and motion happening in those frames.
Yeah. Messina just does he just knocks it out of the park here. And the coloring too. I mean, Jesus, the coloring in here is unbelievable. Like I dabble in some artwork myself, and it's since I've done that, it's given me such a new appreciation when I see it done really well. And just like looking at like the use of color in here, and just like the sense of the design work, all of that, it's just it all flows amazingly well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really enjoyed a lot of the character designs too.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with Jasper. When you think of a character that is Spider-Man like, you think like really young and energetic and fun, but he looks tired.
Mm-hmm.
He looks over it. And I really like that about his character design.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, it's a fun book just as a whole, and it's got its problems. There's definitely things that, like you said, it does kind of feel like it was truncated. Feels like stuff is kind of rushed through, and I think that's kind of the big, I think, which is kind of like it's kind of saying something about the book, that it sets up all these things that we really want to see more of. It kind of says something about how well all that stuff is done, and how it's not that this book was a chore to read. It's just we wish there was more of that stuff in it.
Yeah, for sure. And it wasn't a chore to read. It's a lot of fun to read. It just leaves you wanting more, and unfortunately there is no more.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Kay, is there anything else you wanted to say about the bounce? I think those are kind of the big things that kind of jumped out at me.
Yeah, no, I think we covered a lot. We covered a good bit of it.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, in summary, basic summation. What would you say about this? Would you recommend people read it? What do you think?
I absolutely recommend that people should read it, but I also feel like they should come in with not the highest possible expectations of it. Especially, I don't know too much about authors or artists, but knowing who Joe Casey is from what you were saying, there are probably really high expectations for people who are fans of Joe Casey, and curb your enthusiasm a little bit, but I still recommend reading it.
I think if you're a Joe Casey fan, this is very similar in vein to a lot of other stuff he was done. And again, that kind of perennial curse he has of books being truncated, you'll be very familiar with that because that's happened to him a lot, unfortunately. So, and I don't know if he's ever had a book that he really kind of like finished to the point that he really wanted to. Possibly was it Godland, I think, was this kind of like sci-fi series he did. I think that one he had kind of seen to its fruition, but I haven't read that, so I'm not sure. But yeah, that's kind of what I felt too. It's if you're used to Casey's work and just kind of like that feeling of I wish there was more, you're definitely going to get that here. So if that's something that disappoints you about Casey stuff like me, then unfortunately this is not going to change here. But otherwise, it is a definite fun read. I don't think I'd place this as like my favorite thing he's done. I think that's still his Wildcats work, but this is still pretty good. It's definitely up there.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. Kay, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Call Us Casters, and you can listen to Call Us Casters anywhere you find podcasts.
Okay, great. And that does it for this episode of the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club. If you enjoyed listening to Kay, then keep your eyes peeled and your ears ready, because he's going to be coming on the main show to talk about Hellboy 2 pretty soon for us. We're doing it a few days from now, but by the time you listen to this, it'll actually be a few months away. So if you're really angling for that interview, you're gonna have to wait for a little bit. But that does it for this episode. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for subscribing. If you enjoyed listening to this, please make sure to tell your friends about it. If you have any comments about it, please leave your comments on the Patreon page. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any recommendations. Let me know if you want to come on and discuss something. That does it for now, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.